Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everyone.
We are continuing our conversation through 10 values for the modern family, kind of basing our conversation off this book called More Than Words by Aaron Wathan. And this week, it is about forgiveness, the daily bread of relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good chapter. Forgiveness certainly is an awesome subject. And so we thought we might just jump in with some definitions because the author doesn't give definitions. I think she already figures we've covered those enough, but sometimes it's nice. I like to go back and what do these words actually mean to us? So a definition for forgiveness first. Forgiveness, psychologists generally define forgiveness as a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward another person or group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness. So that's our definition for forgiveness today. And then two parts of forgiveness. We have mercy and we have grace. And so mercy is defined as the act of withholding a deserved punishment. And grace is the act of endowing or giving unmerited favor or blessing. So, and those are definitely attributes of God.
Yeah.
And so this is a little illustration. I get to do the sermon illustration. So this quarter, and it's a special quarter. I had to take it from Nancy's desk this morning, but and it means a lot to her. But the coin itself actually represents love. So if you think about this coin being love, so there's two sides to love. You have the mercy side and you have the grace side. So the side that undeserved, that you are being withheld from a deserved punishment, and then also that you've been given unmerited favor and blessing. So all part of love. And the coin itself has a little bit of a story, and I'll just really quick say that in that. So this was a gift to Nancy when we had went up, and her dad had been diagnosed with ALS, and he was starting his decline. And her sisters, Nancy was having a milestone birthday, so they decided her birthday was a good rallying time to get all the family in, grandkids, nieces, nephews, everybody, and have a big family party for family and friends, and to enjoy that time together. So we're up there for the milestone birthday. It was also some good friend of the family who attended, who had just been diagnosed with a recurrence of terminal cancer. And she had just been to her 50th high school reunion and was trying to be a blessing and make amends and be a part of her classmates' lives who were there. And small farm town. I mean, everybody knows everybody, probably only 20 to 30 people in that graduating class. But she wanted to do something special and something that she could touch each one. And so she went online and was researching what happened. You're going to get an age. What happened special in the year of 1964? And she's going through all these things. And she found out that you probably can't see it on the camera, but 1964 was the last year that we actually had pure silver quarters. And so as she's talking with each one of her classmates, she gave them each a quarter to commemorate the 50th anniversary of their class and to talk with them. And so she was showing grace. And she gave Nancy, for her 50th birthday, a quarter also.
It's a great story. It's a great illustration. Yeah, that's a good reminder of the sides of love that we have. So, yeah. One of the things I love that the author talks about is the impulse of grace. And she kind of says that our gut reaction for most human beings is to just forgive and move on, to not even address how someone has affected us or anything. And she says, let's call it the mercy instinct. The first and immediate reaction of the one who's been wounded is usually just to forgive and begin to salvage what is left of the connection. And she says it's probably a survival mechanism, that we need our group and our circle for protection. That goes way back from the beginning of time. People needed to be in groups for protection. And so cutting a member of the community out because they have done something, they've wronged you in some way, wasn't a great survival tactic. Yeah. And so I think that's a good insight that that's kind of our instinct, is to not cut people out when they just do something wrong for us. But then she goes on to say that may be our immediate reaction, but sometimes we want to retaliate against the person and to hurt that who has hurt us, or to prove how right or wrong or good we are, as opposed to how wrong and bad people who've hurt us are. And while the mercy instinct might be the quickest and most natural, the impulses of anger, fear, and control tend to be longer and louder in duration. So,
yeah, and part of that she brings out too is the fact that we allow stuff to get heavy, that we continue to bring these small pieces in, the small baggage, and things pile up, and then we use those as our case against that person.
Right. Yeah, I love some of what she talked about how if you go into someone's home who does a spring cleaning every year, and they clean out their closets, and they donate, and they throw away, and they sell, and they have a pattern to doing that on a regular basis and cleaning house. There's a big difference between that house and if you go into a house that hasn't been purged in 30 years.
Right.
And it's just piles and piles of stuff, and the closet's full of stuff you can't even imagine. And our relationships are similar. If we let those little things pile up, then that resentment grows. And then it's a big pile of little things and not one big event that someone has wronged us. And that can, that results in people just wanting to cut people out because that pile has become too heavy. And none of those things are really worth cutting a relationship out, but the pile gets heavy, and you're like, you go back to how, a family says we'd rather just light a match and just burn the whole house down rather than clean out all these closets. If it weren't for the family heirlooms, we'd just burn the whole place down. But sometimes in a relationship, we do that same thing. When you have 30 years of little tiny things adding up, there comes a point where this is too hard to work through. I just want to burn this relationship down. And that's when you end up with these people, siblings who haven't talked in 20 years. They can't remember why they don't talk.
Exactly. We've all known those people. In fact, we have some of them in our families, probably, if we are honest about it.
Yeah.
And, so, it's very true. No lists. So, as being one of the priorities.
Yeah. So I thought that was a good point. I'm one of those that I don't like conflict, and so I will happily just usually swallow it and go on. But it doesn't always mean that I've worked through that, especially if I've never addressed it with the person.
Right.
It can fester, and then they do another thing, and then another thing, and then by the end, I'm just like, these people are dead to me because I have all these little things that they have done to me. So
yeah, when we're talking about forgiveness too, we're not saying that we're definitely not saying that we stay with people who hurt us.
Exactly.
That is a part of this as well. The turn the other cheek doesn't apply to abuse.
Right.
That's not the way Jesus intended it.
Right.
Honor your father and mother only goes to a certain point.
Yeah.
That was that's a specific relationship there, and so you don't have to stay in an abusive relationship. That's not part of what we're saying for forgiveness either. That's not. Right. You can forgive that person, but you do not have to take their abuse. You deserve safety. Right.
Yeah, she says forgiveness is a matter of the spirit. Sometimes you forgive and move on, move forward together. Sometimes you forgive and move on to a new freedom. God does not ask us to stay in places where we're being hurt. And I think that's an important thing. Just because you forgive the person doesn't mean that you won't need to continue the relationship. It doesn't even have to be as drastic as an abuse. It could just be a constant. It's just you only have so much capacity for so many relationships, and this is a toxic one.
Right.
This is a person who takes advantage of me over and over again, or it's a toxic personality. Or in my situation, we've limited engagement to the point of not having a battle or anything, but have decided that there are certain members of our family that we can't get past the racism that is constantly overtaking every conversation we ever have. And it's a toxic environment. It's a toxic relationship. And so it's better I can forgive you for that and I can love you without having much of a relationship with you.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point.
Yeah. So she talks a lot about, like every chapter talks about forgiveness at home. And I love the perspective that she had. She focused not on teaching your children about forgiveness, which I think is, of course, is important. And we all do that. But she talks about forgiveness at home is really kind of centered around marriages.
Yes.
And so I really loved some of what she said there.
Yes, I did too.
No.
So obviously the no list is one of the big ones for marriages because that's easy to do.
Yes.
And then letting as she says, the same is true in our relationships. We let junk build up over a lifetime, little resentments over nothing major. Maybe a few hurts that run deeper and but never exactly broke us. And as Amy said earlier, maybe all that brings the big resentment in our soul. And so I like her analogy or thing that she gives in her marital counseling, is she calls it the one daily bread practice, or the one thing. And the one thing happens in this way. She tells couples in the premarital counseling that there may be days when it's hard to be together. Find one thing about your spouse, something they did for you, something they gave up for you, something extraordinary about them that you really love, or maybe just a trait that you find especially endearing. Put that one thing in some type of an emotional file folder. And then when that time comes, because you're going to be infuriated by them, then you go to that file folder and you pull it out and you think of that one thing. Or hopefully there's many things that we can say about our spouses that we love. But we can go back to that and say, this wasn't important, and I have all these great qualities that I'm going to hold on to.
Right. Yeah. I thought that was a great practice, and some people maybe have already done that, and not even done it intentionally. But because those little things, there's ebbs and flows in any relationship, but especially a marriage relationship. I mean, she points out how in a marriage, it's our longest enduring human relationship. If we live with our spouse far longer than we ever live with our children. Right. I mean, with our parents as children. Longer than our children live with us. Longer than we live at home with our siblings. I mean, if you think about it, if you have a long marriage, that is the longest relationship you ever have. And so there's going to be ebbs and flows to it. And there's going to be weeks where you just want to punch them in the face, But because it's the little things. It's just, why did you pick up your shoes? And why it's those everyday little things that just grate on your nerves. And I think during quarantine, we especially saw some strain on marriages.
Oh, absolutely.
Stuck at home, trying to work at home, trying to parent children, trying to school children, not being able to get out of the house. And we couldn't get a break from each other. And so I thought this tip was so good just to have intentionally referring back to those big things about your spouse that are much bigger than they didn't pick up their shoes.
Yeah. So Nancy and I, this will be our 30th wedding anniversary here in a couple of months. So we will have spent 30 years more time with each other than alone with our parents. And so we're in that group that she's talking about. And I know, and so we'll be honest with this, COVID's been especially hard because Nancy works out of the house. Mm-hmm. So she is home all day. So she sees every flaw that is within the house. And so, and then I come home and I'm like, oh, it's my home. And she's like, yeah, but that light that keeps flickering or this or that. And so, to me sometimes I'm like, really? The light again? However, I have to remember she's there all the time. And plus, just that grace of the fact that she's means so much more to me than a flickering light.
Right,
yes. Get the flickering light fixed.
But you get drowned in that. And I think, there was a big push about a few months into the heart of the quarantine where we really were all staying home, and a lot of people moving out of cities into big suburbia houses. Mm-hmm. And there was this big flux. And I can't imagine that it wasn't partially because people are stuck in these little tiny apartments and they're like, our relationship will not survive this if we don't get into a bigger space. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the trickle down for that, and I know that as a lot of our stay-at-home parents feel that way. They stay at home all day long, and they come home and the spouse doesn't notice the same things, and so it just becomes this kind of those little things can really pile up.
Yeah. Try and get a contractor right now to do anything. It's impossible. I hear from, we've tried it with our friends, or if you can get one, you can't afford it.
They can name their price. Yeah. So I love that. I love the being intentional about following away those big things. And she talks about, for her, one of the big things for her is she has a spouse that's supportive of her career. Mm-hmm. And they have moved for her job, and he has stayed home at periods of time with the children so she could work. And that, of course, resonates with me because Jason has followed my career. And we've lived in 3 or 4 different cities for my job, and he's followed. So that's a biggie that I fall back is at the end of the day, okay, he didn't do this, but the man got up and moved across the country for me. And that, the picking up the shoes can't really compare,
right.
So in the aggravation, but.
So forgiveness is a blessing to other people, but it's also a blessing to you. because, and as she points out, she says sometimes forgiveness is just for the good of our own souls. For the breathing room that appears when we let go of some hurt, some burden we hauled around too long, thinking it would somehow punish the one who harmed us, it won't. Even if we have done a good job of practicing daily forgiveness and clearing out the clutter of our relationships as we go, most everyone has something they need to forgive, and everyone has something for which they need to be forgiven.
Yeah.
So there's also that introspection.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always quick to point out what the other person has done in conflict, but usually there's something we have done too.
Right.
We don't really want to focus on that, but
we never make mistakes.
Yeah, never. But it's true. I mean, when you think about, I have had parents, and one in particular, a mom, and she was deeply wronged by her spouse. I mean, deeply. The relationship fractured. There was no salvaging it, and he left her, and it was terrible, and she was left holding the bag and the children and all the other things. It's terrible, but a couple years down the road, she had to focus on that anger, because her anger that she was holding on to, which she thought, I think, was a retaliation to him, that she was holding this anger, he didn't care. He had moved on, and she was losing out by holding this anger and not just forgiving what she could and moving on herself. And so I think that's important, that for your own soul, sometimes you got to forgive.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, for most of you, you will find, other than maybe our a little bit older audience, but as I've seen it so many times with my friends who are taking care of elderly parents and who are a little bit older than I and Nancy are, but they're having to care for their elderly parents. But suddenly it's easy to stack up those little things that your parent may have said to you that was hurtful when you were younger, or just even little things like that, and then same thing, that relationship gets fractured in the end. And so we need to make sure that we forgive our parents, and that we seek forgiveness from our parents too, and that. So I'll give you that as you age to think about that as well.
Yeah, good. When she talks about forgiveness in Scripture, I love what she has to say here. She talks about the Lord's Prayer, which we all could probably recite. And she, it's Our Father in Heaven, hallowed be thy name. You know that prayer. But one of the things she says is, she goes into the fact that we just don't have very many prayers from Jesus.
No.
We really don't. I don't know.
I hadn't thought about that.
I hadn't either. I don't know what the gospel writers were thinking, but they did not include very many prayers that Jesus prayed. And so we have very few to look at. And so this one, of course, is the model prayer that he's given us. But she says, if you think about the prayer, she says, aside from the greeting and the signing off, this prayer asks for 5 things. 1, that God's name be made known and be made holy. 2, that God's will be known on earth as it is in the divine realm. 3, that the people be fed. 4, that we be forgiven and learn to forgive. 5, that we be protected from evil, the evil of the world, and that which might be, shall we say, self-directed. And so 2 of those few things that he really says there have to do with forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty big point, I think, that Jesus is trying to make, and the scripture writers. I always say, and you're probably tired of me hearing this, is they included it for a reason.
Right.
There's so much material. There's 3 years worth of ministry here. They've included it for a reason. What are they trying to tell us? Jesus has included forgiveness twice in this prayer. Right. What's he trying to show us?
Yeah. And she brings it out too that they said, this prayer is meant to be a daily prayer. And so our daily bread. And so it needs to be part of, as she puts it, the liturgy of life.
Yeah.
That every day we think about, that we will be forgiven and that we will learn to forgive.
Yeah.
It needs to be part of every day.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and she says the Psalms are full of prayers for special occasions. Funerals and joyous things. But this is an everyday prayer. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's a great point that she makes. Yeah.
So, and then she points out that one of the other few prayers in the Bible is the prayer that Jesus prays from the cross. Mm-hmm. And so, as she says, one of the few other times we do hear Jesus pray is from the cross. Through the greatest suffering imaginable, he says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Mercy like that, extended to others in a moment of great pain, does not just happen, nor can the depth of that mercy be strictly spoken. It comes from a life of deep prayer and intention from the practices of everyday faith shared in community, and from the daily grace of letting go so that we can better love the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. But
Back to the coin.
Back
Love,
to the coin.
Grace and mercy.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love this chapter. What else did you pick up on that really drove home? I feel like I almost highlighted the whole thing.
Yeah, same. She gives some great examples of community, forgiveness after the Charleston, the Aimee church shooting there, and the white supremacists that came in, but yet the community came together, and there was actually racial healing and forgiveness during that time.
Right.
So that was a great part of it. I said, if I had to focus on my two favorite parts, one, she wrapped it up fantastic with scripture.
Yep.
And then also the part, I think that this really is a fantastic marriage chapter.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's a top-down approach with kids in this one.
Right.
Because they'll learn from you.
Absolutely, yeah. They see you and your marriage relationship forgiving each other for these little, transgressions and microaggressions and all that kind of stuff, then they're going to start to do that too. The habits are going to be formed. So at the end of the chapter, she kind of challenged us with some questions, and one that really made me go, ouch, was when you have conflict, does your focus go first to what the other person has done or what you have done? And that's a matter of flipping your hearts, and viewing things of what is my role in this, not of he did this, she said this, he didn't do this, she didn't do this, but instead, what is my role in this first? And addressing myself first before I focus on them.
Great point.
That's a good one. So, yeah.
Well, I think we've covered forgiveness well, and it's a tough subject, but a very worthwhile one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I love it because I think sometimes when we think about forgiveness, we think of the big things that we need to forgive people of. And we miss out on the fact that every single day we have to forgive. We have to forgive other people, and we also have to examine ourselves. And every single day God forgives us. And so, of course, that is modeled in how we should respond to other people. So, yeah. Thanks, Roger, for joining me today.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Hope you have a great week.